Assalamu alaikum. This is Hena Zuberi, and you're watching Muslim Network News. Our top story: a Trump era decision reversed by the Biden administration. President Joe Biden plans to suspend oil and gas leases in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. This follows his earlier order to place a temporary moratorium on these leases in the area. 2 million acres of the 19.3 million acre refuge are made up of coastal plains considered part of a sensitive environmental area. The refuge is also highly prospective for oil and gas resources, according to the U.S. Bureau of Land Management. President Biden's order is based on alleged legal deficiencies underlying the program, as well as inadequacies in the previous environmental review. The move is part of a broader push by Democrats to reestablish American support towards the environment. The president canceled the Keystone XL pipeline on his first day in office, and in February, the United States officially rejoined the Paris Agreement. So, exactly how many mosques are there in America? The number of mosques in the United States has increased by 31% over the last decade. The U.S. Mosque Survey found that in 2010 there were 2,106 mosques in the country. By 2020, that number had risen to 2,769. The data is based on a 10-year statistical study of American mosques. It was conducted by the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding and the Islamic Society of North America, or ISNA. The survey also found that half of American mosques today have a paid full-time imam as compared to 43% in 2010. It also revealed that Jummah, or Friday prayers, saw a 16% increase in average attendance. The study included both Shia and Sunni mosques. Previous studies were conducted in 2000 and 2010. Coming up later tonight in our show is a detailed analysis on the U.S. Mosque Survey with the researcher Dr. Ihsan Badvi. So keep watching Muslim Network News. A 20-year-old man was arrested on Friday in Seattle for allegedly plotting to join ISIS. Alvin Hunter Bourne Williams was taken into custody as he was attempting to board an international flight. The FBI was first alerted by his mother and high school administrators in 2017. They said he was radicalized online. Williams moved to Seattle, where members of a local mosque assisted him with food, accommodations, and tuition. This was all on the condition that he would abandon his efforts to join ISIS. Mosque members ended their relationship with Williams when they found that he was still engaged with extremist groups online. Confidential sources close to him monitored his activity and alerted the FBI of his travel plans. The FBI has surveilled and sent thousands of agent provocateurs to Muslim communities across the country. The rather ordinary nature of attending and participating in community institutions that are important to one's faith provided an entry point by the FBI to closely monitor and scrutinize Muslims without regard to potential aftermath of such intrusive surveillance. Mosques, in turn, have been at the forefront of warning the FBI of suspicious activities. If convicted, Williams faces up to 20 years in prison. An international consortium of researchers at the University of California, Santa Cruz, says they have sequenced and assembled the entire human genome. The effort includes parts that were missed in the sequencing of the first human genome 2 decades ago. The previous effort by Human Genome Project and Celera Genomics had missed 8%. The DNA sequence was not used from a person. This recent effort used new DNA sequencing technologies to fill the gaps. However, it still had intentional limitations to speed up the effort. The project's co-leader, Karen Miga, emphasized that she won't consider the announcement official until the paper is peer-reviewed and published in a medical journal. Former President Donald Trump has lost yet another online platform for his opinions. His blog entitled From the Desk of Donald J. Trump was shut down this week. There's no clear explanation from his office as to why. Trump was banned from social media platforms such as Twitter and Facebook in January after the Capitol Hill riots that killed 5 people. Trump started the blog to share comments with his followers. It has now been scrubbed from his website after going live less than a month ago. Interactions on the blog reduced significantly a few weeks after it was launched. It had lower traffic than sites like Pet Finder and Eat This, not that. More than 8 million square miles of land has been added to the world's national parks and conservation areas over the last 10 years. This is an increase of 42% of land, with the greatest growth seen in marine and coastal areas. The report was conducted by the United Nations Environment Programme, World Conservation Monitoring Center, and the International Union for Conservation of Nature with support from the National Geographic Society. Land conservation is considered critical to fighting climate change. It helps absorb greenhouse gases and prevents their emissions. The latter are a result of practices like deforestation, construction, and excessive driving. Since the 10th United Nations Biodiversity Conference in 2010, protected and conserved areas have grown around the world. This has led to the addition of newly protected areas every month. The next global biodiversity framework is due to be settled at the UN Biodiversity Conference in China in October. Buckingham Palace banned ethnic minorities from office roles until at least the late 1960s. This came to light amid an investigation by The Guardian, a United Kingdom newspaper, on the royal family's influence on British law. Documents from the National Archives reveal that the Queen's chief financial manager ordered his staff to restrict the appointment of colored immigrants or foreigners to clerical roles. They were, however, permitted to work as domestic servants. Refusal to hire based on race has been illegal in the UK since 1976, but the Queen was personally exempt from those laws for over 4 decades. In March, the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan Markle, alleged that a member of the family had expressed concern about her child's skin color. Markle is the royal family's first mixed-race member. China has launched a direct railway line linking North China's inland province of Shanxi with Paris. Loaded with 50 containers, the train left Shanxi's province on Wednesday for the journey, which spanned over 6,000 miles. Over a span of 20 days, the train will pass through Mongolia, Russia, Belarus, Poland, and Germany. That is about half the time taken by a ship, as well as about half the cost. The move is seen as a boon to businesses. It will allow them to save capital by being able to react more quickly to changing market conditions and reduce supply chain and holding stock. A coalition of Israeli political parties announced Wednesday night that they have agreed to form a new government. This would mean the exit of Israel's longest-serving Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Yair Lapid, leader of the centrist Yesh Atid party, holds the mandate to form the government. However, Naftali Bennett, the leader of the small right-wing party Yamina, will take on the role of Prime Minister for the first 2 years of a 4-year term. Bennett once led a West Bank settler organization. He previously said that he did not believe in a two-state solution in the West Bank and Gaza. Lapid would serve as foreign minister until the two men swap roles halfway through the term. The coalition agreement must now pass a vote of confidence in Israel's parliament before a new government and prime minister are sworn in. In a historic moment, the small Arab political party, United Arab List, decided to join the coalition. While it's the first time an Arab party has joined the coalition in Israel, they're unlikely to have a minister in the government. Have you ever heard the term half-widows from Kashmir? What does it mean, and who are the half-widows? More on these silent victims of an occupation in a report by Ali Khalaf and Saleha Farouk.
Kashmiris have been struggling for freedom for more than 100 years. They want India and the UN to deliver on their promise for Kashmiris to vote on the future of Kashmir. India, however, has not only backed down on its promise, but has placed 1 million armed soldiers in Kashmir. These Indian soldiers are free to kidnap, detain, and kill as they please. These Indian soldiers have impunity, while more than 100,000 Kashmiris have died at their hands. No military officer has ever been punished. This is where Kashmiri women looking for their husband have coined themselves the term half-widow. They have an association. They demonstrated and petitioned the government. They are looking for their husbands. There are several thousands of Kashmiris who have disappeared. However, at least 300 women are involved in this organized half-widows movement. They are half-widows since their husbands are missing but not declared deceased. Indian military does not inform relatives about the kidnapping or detention of a Kashmiri. It rarely publishes a list of the deceased. These half-widows are uncertain whether their husbands are dead or alive. They suffer from economic hardship. They suffer from psychological trauma. They don't want to remarry, hoping that their husbands are alive and one day be released by the Indian military. It is, however, possible that their husbands might be in one of the mass graves found in Indian-held Kashmir. Half-widows call themselves the resident of Dardpora. It means the pain town. A pain town for the half-widows of Kashmir.
Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you and you could be me for just 1 hour, if we could find a way to get inside each other's minds, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Welcome back. In our show last night, we reported that the UNHCR assessed the living conditions of more than 18,000 Rohingya refugees on Bashanchar Island. To discuss this in detail, let's go to Saleha Farouk, who's with Adam Carroll, the head of Burma Task Force team at Justice for All.
Thank you so much, Hena. Today, we're very happy to be joined by Adam Carroll, who is Director of United Nations Programs at Justice for All Canada's Special Burma Task Force. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Adam.
Yeah, thank you.
Last week, thousands of Rohingya had protested their living conditions on the island of Bashanchar. These protests, as you might know, also coincided with a visit by the UNHCR as they visited the region this week as well. What are some major concerns and needs that these Rohingya are expressing after being moved onto the island?
Well, there are a lot of unknowns here. The government of Bangladesh has not given a lot of access to UN and other outside agencies to assess the safety of the very isolated island of Bashanchar. So the concerns about viability and safety remain. It's very hard for me to say that the conditions there are worse. Certainly the buildings are more solid. And so when you show images of it, it looks like a prison camp, or but still, it's hard to assess whether indeed it's um, more dangerous. What it is, however, is certainly more isolated, and it does not represent a solution for the problem of the Rohingya, which is that they need to be uh, provided with education, with internet access, with work, with human dignity recognized, and then eventually repatriation to their homeland.
Thank you so much for that. In their recent visit to the region, they credited actually the Bangladeshi government for supporting their COVID-19 response efforts for these Rohingya communities. Do you believe that sufficient efforts have been made to respond to the health needs of refugees in the camps and on the island?
Well, UNHCR, provides kind of a little bit of cover to the Bangladesh government here, by offering these statements. I know though that UNHCR hasn't fully signed on to the Bashanchar plan, and that behind the scenes there are disagreements. I kind of wish that the UNHCR would be less diplomatic and more open and honest in public about their concerns. We have reached out to UNHCR even for this show. I asked some colleagues if they would be willing to respond, but they haven't responded. In fact, we even know somebody's cousin who works for UNHCR in Bangladesh, but we haven't heard back. So if we do, I will let you know in case they will come on a later show. But I think the UN uh, has been trying to work behind the scenes to give them some credit. But with the rise of the pandemic, since the virus strains or the variants in India, have become much more transmissible, we begin to see 900 cases in the camps, which we didn't for a long time. Everyone was surprised last year when we didn't see the spread of COVID-19. But now it's beginning to spread. There's been at least 13 deaths that are known. And there's a lot more concern about these very crowded conditions. And in fact, there has been a lockdown recently placed on several of the camps, not on Basanchar yet, but they're sitting ducks. And so I think that may also contribute to the sense of tension and nervousness that erupted in some violence this past week during the visit. I should add also that just last week, the head of the UN General Assembly, Volkan Bozkır, actually visited the camps as well. It may be that these visits bring people's sense of expectation into play, and they see no immediate results and no immediate improvement to their conditions or even any hope. And so no wonder they're responding with demonstrations, and they want their voice to be heard.
Now, the Bangladeshi police had also recently arrested some Rohingya refugees when they tried to flee Basanchar Island. Do these refugees, in fact, have the right of movement on the island? For instance, can people return to Cox's Bazar camps if they wanted to?
Well, Rohingya have been escaping, so it seems that the answer is no, unless they escape. And some have been swimming, which is really dangerous. We don't want Rohingya be drowning in their pursuit of freedom. So, some families have perhaps been separated. There's a lot of problems, and it's there. I can't say for sure the extent of the family separation problem, but a lot of answers are needed.
Now, since the inception of this island, do you believe that the Bangladeshi government is prioritizing various elements of protection or livelihood, including sustainability, for those 18,000 refugees living on the island, of course, in addition to their health needs, as we're discussing today?
Uh, well, I don't think they've been doing a sufficient job. And I do think that somehow the Bangladesh government has convinced a lot of people of Bangladesh that this is a good way to treat the Rohingya. However, that's a very divisive policy of separating them out from the main population. I think that really the main focus also needs to be on Myanmar itself. With the recent coup, it's unlikely that the Rohingya are going to be repatriated anytime soon. And speaking of the UN, where I have some duties, I see that in the UN General Assembly, there's been a resolution to put to have an arms embargo on Myanmar, on Burma, but the ASEAN countries have watered down the resolution. And now this week, the ASEAN leaders are planning to visit Burma and meet with the junta. It's not clear whether they're going to meet with the democracy movement. In fact, ASEAN has been a very problematic player so far. They issued a 5-point plan for the government, the so-called government, the military junta to follow, but the military junta is just playing games. So again, the coup has created also a health crisis because all the COVID prevention efforts have fallen away. The medical professionals, many of them have fled into the ethnic states, and there's a real health crisis. And ethnic groups are calling on the international community and also the neighboring states of India and Thailand to allow health and medical supplies to cross the borders into the ethnic areas because there's a looming crisis. When there's a health crisis in Burma, it's going to spread to other countries, including across the border into Bangladesh. So wherever there is a spread of the pandemic, it will spread further. So that's a concern here, with besides the conditions of the camps, the health crisis.
Of course. Now, your organization does quite a bit of advocacy and awareness work in regards to the situation in Myanmar and Burma, as you're discussing today. What are the risk factors in terms of the devastating violence and the loss that has affected the local Burmese population? What is the likelihood that that could touch the Rohingyas that are still in the region of Burma at this time?
Right. Well, it will affect them, and there are at least 500,000 Rohingya left in Rakhine State. There's very little access to them. There are checkpoints, and they've never had freedom of movement, not for decades. So they are stuck. They're in a kind of open air prison, just as the Rohingya refugees are in a different kind of prison in Bangladesh. So we really need to solve this whole problem without restoring democracy, even an imperfect democracy. In Burma, we won't get repatriation. And so, meanwhile, the international community needs to continue providing funds for the refugees, providing services, including education, including jobs, not just treat the Rohingya as zoo animals who need to be fed, but to really partner with them and improve their situation. That's really what needs to be done. And the Bangladesh government should recognize them as refugees formally with all the rights that go along with that status.
Words from Adam Carroll, who is Director of UN Programs at Justice for All Canada's Special Burma Task Force campaign. Adam, once again, thank you so much for being here with us today. And back to Hena Zuberi in the news studio.
Thank you, Saleha and Adam. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break and we'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. Earlier tonight, we shared the findings of a recent report on the U.S. Mosque survey. The author of this report, Dr. Ehsan Bagbi, is joining Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid for a detailed conversation. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. Now there are about 2,800 masjids in America, and almost 50% imam are being paid to be an imam. In the community which thrives on volunteerism, that's a new development. And these are the findings of a new survey about mosques in America released by Islamic Society of North America in collaboration with ISPU. And to discuss with us is no other than the one who has authored this report and the principal investigator, Dr. Ehsan Bagbi. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Mujahid.
Dr. Ehsan Bagbi is the author of this report, and he's also associate professor at the University of Kentucky on Islamic Studies department. Professor, so share with us, what are the essential findings of this report?
Well, I think the main headline is simply that the American mosque in America is healthy, growing, and improving overall. I mean, there are some danger signs which need to be addressed, but overall, it's a healthy picture, especially when you look at what's going on in churches and synagogues. I'm a researcher and I rub shoulders with Christian and Jewish and other researchers of other American congregations, and they're pulling out their hair, in terms of the decline in church and synagogue attendance, in the lack of young adults in their congregations. And so the American mosque is very much in contrast to that. We have a very positive picture overall. And I think, American Muslims should be very proud of what we have accomplished. We've come a long way. As you probably know, Mujahid, you can remember way back when we were praying in small places and homes, and look at now, we have big, gigantic masjids, but we still have some ways to go to realize the mission of Islam, to realize the ideals of the prophetic masjid.
So you gave an overall happy picture, but with some signs of challenges which we have. One of the challenges which I see in your report is that in certain states, there's a huge jump, like Michigan, 65% jump, Ohio, 57% jump. Does it have to deal with more undercount 10 years ago? Because population-wise, Michigan and Ohio are not the thriving areas.
Right. And, you know, I'm an objective researcher. I have no idea what each time I do this, the results will be. So I also was surprised that Ohio and Michigan. The only thing I can say is that masjids are opening, are being established in new areas, typically suburban areas. And I think that is going on in Ohio and Michigan. That would be my only explanation.
So overall, what is the percentage increase as compared to 10 years ago?
I think we said 31% increase in the total number of masjids. The number of masjids from 2000 to 2010, this is the third time we've done this, and the goal is to do it every 10 years to coincide with the census. So this is like a census of masajid in America.
So
I'm not saying this is my last time doing it, inshallah. But so there was a big jump from 2000 to 2010, and I think anecdotally we can see that. I think it's less clear to anybody just observing that there is another spike of new masjids, but that is the reality of our count.
Okay. Share with us, you were mentioning that your colleagues in the Jewish and the Christian communities, are seeing a decline in their congregations. How is the growth or the decline compares with what is happening in the Muslim community in terms of building mosques and building places of worship?
Well, again, just overall, churches are closing. They're not opening. Congregation size is declining, not expanding. And that is the opposite of our community. However, we are catching up. So for instance, purpose-built mosque, and I don't have the percentage right in front of us, continues to grow. In other words, there are more and more masajid that were built to be masjids, but we're still way behind churches and synagogues, where almost all of them, I mean, a large percentage, were built as churches or synagogues. Of course, they were built as churches and synagogues typically a long time ago. So we're catching up with that. You mentioned the figure that about half of our imams are full-time paid, and that is definitely an increase through the decades. And so that's a good news, but we're way behind churches and synagogues, where in mainline churches and synagogues, about 90% of their churches, almost no matter how small, you can have a congregation in a church that has 100 people attending on Sunday, and they'll have a full-time paid pastor. So we're way behind in certain aspects, which shows the youth of our masjid community. We've only been around in terms of, the real growth for, about 50 years, where churches and synagogues have been here for, a few centuries.
Is it, you're describing as we are way behind. And I say some of the mosques, people actually take a pride in doing the volunteer. Everything is volunteer. There are about 1,000 people, and there's hardly any staff there, and they are very proud of the. So is it the understanding of volunteerism, which is different, or not being paid for religious services is taken as a point of pride. So I'm trying to understand, are we way behind or we are way ahead?
I think you made a good point in the sense that we are both way ahead and way behind. Let's be clear that a congregation, a masjid, let's say, has a ceiling when they are dealing only with volunteers. And that is a problem. However, many church researchers have, looked over my shoulder and said, wow, isn't it so great that you have volunteers who run the congregation? We don't have many congregations that, where you don't have any paid staff. And they love the fact that we have so many congregations, masajid, that are being run solely on the basis of volunteers. So I must say that the ideal, what we would hope to work towards, is hiring staff. We need staff. I think there's a ceiling that it is difficult for us to develop past a certain point, especially when it comes to outreach, social activism, the basic things of youth programming and things like that can be done with volunteers. But I think we need staff to go to the next level. However, we want to maintain a robust system of volunteers. So we want the best of both worlds. And we have not realized that yet.
Okay, so share with us what have you learned about the attendance of the mosque?
Well, again, good news. Attendance continues to grow. The average Jummah attendance is now up to about 400. And what is a significant change is what can be called the mega mosque. So the mega congregation, the mega church, the mega synagogue is defined as a congregation that has the Sunday or Friday night service as 2,000 and above. So 4% of our masjids now can be classified as mega masjids. I mean, some masjids have multiple Jummahs. And even some of them have satellites, and we count that as part of the total of the people attending Jummah. So we have a masjid that might have 2 satellites, 3 satellites. So anyway, I think the growth in Jummah attendance is partly explained by the growth of these mega mosques.
One of the critical things which you have mentioned, and I was shocked to see that, was the attendance of the Black participant in the mosque have declined.
Yeah, that's one of the surprises. That is one of the kind of bad news in this report, that the growth of African American masjids has plateaued and in fact declined slightly. The number of conversions in African American masjids has declined, has plateaued, stagnated, declined. And I personally think that the African American masjid is in trouble. They're not attracting their youth, their young adults, and conversions have plateaued. They're not having a good number of converts into their masjids. I am of African American background. I grew up in African American masjids, so I'm not saying this as an outsider. I'm saying this as somebody who is deeply committed to the success of the African American masjid. but clearly there are problems, and African American Muslims need to address this. And I must say, I think all of us, all Muslims of America, should pay attention to this issue and be involved in the discussion of how we move forward. But I really think this needs to be put on the front burner. This needs to be focused on, and it's something that we together need to, address. African American Muslims have contributed so much to the experience of the American Muslim community. In fact, the presence of African American Muslims is what has made the American Muslim community so unique. We're very different from the Muslim communities in Europe and other places. And the reason is because, for the most part, that there has been a lively influence and participation of African American Muslims, and we need to maintain that.
Yes, I share your concern, although I don't look Black, but I live in the Black community. And 5 mosques in last 10 years have disappeared in my neighborhood.
Really?
Yes, led by Blacks, organized by Blacks. I was just attendee. So that, I think, is what has shown up in your data. To me, is a reality sitting in Chicago, at least. So it is a issue of high level of concern if that is the situation in other areas. I'm talking about the mosque run by African American communities in the area, not necessarily the attendance of Blacks in other congregation, because I think in some congregations, in my observation, not research, attendance of African American Muslim have increased, maybe because some other mosque have closed down or some reason. Tell us this, is this growth is only in the mosque, or there is a equal growth in Muslim not-for-profit, like Muslim schools and things like that?
Well, I didn't look at the total picture of the American Muslim community, which would include all of the nonprofits, all of the other types of organizations that kind of form the totality of the American Muslim community. I did ask about schools, and I'm sorry, I forget, but there was a growth in schools. What I remember is, in particular, a growth in the grades that are offered. So I remember when we first did our study in 2000, there were only a handful of Muslim high schools or that cover up to the 12th grade. And that clearly has changed over the decades. So you have many schools now that cover all the grades, and that is a big change. The number of schools also has increased, but we asked that as an auxiliary question in the survey, where we asked the masjid leader, do they have a school associated with the masjid? So that even does not include the schools that are completely separate, that were founded separately from masjids, which should be even a larger number.
Professor Bogby, there was, in the last couple of decades, there have been quite a bit of news items about nuns increasing in large number, people who are not part of any congregation and things of this nature. And in the Muslim community also, someone dug out a news about unmasked Muslims. Well, you're saying that your data is telling you mosque in number are increasing, attendance in mosque is increasing. Is there any reflection of what is happening to nuns? Are nuns increasing in the Black Muslim community? What is happening here? Do you have any insight?
Well, our study showed that a very healthy percentage of the masjid community are what we term young adults, which would be 18 to 34. That's the age group that Pew uses, which includes Generation Z and young millennials. And so the percentage, which I think was about a fourth of the total masjid community, again, is a very good figure compared to churches and synagogues, where they hardly have any young adults that attend. And Pew and Gallup and all the other researchers have shown that the young adult person in American society has basically left the church and the synagogue. And again, this is one aspect where Christian and Jewish researchers are bemoaning and, crying out loud of what's happening and why. And this is a very dangerous sign for their congregations that young adults have left. So the good news is that our young adults have not left the masjid, but clearly, anecdotally, there are signs of problems, of dissatisfaction. And then when you compare, we're a very young community. We're still very young. We're still largely first generation immigrant with a growing second generation immigrant. And the second generation is still relatively young. So I think ISPU, about 40% of the American Muslim community, and that's total, not mosque, but total, are from 18 to 34. So our percentage is about 25%. So, compared to the 25% are mosque, attend the masjid, at least 10 Friday prayer. But the total number is about close to half. So there is a large percentage of young adult Muslims that are not attending the masjid, and that's kind of the bad news. Can we maintain that healthy percentage of 25% of our community being young adults? Can we maintain that? That's the challenge. That's the challenge.
Professor Bagby, since you're comparing with Christian and Jews and keep mentioning that we are the younger community here, maybe we need to compare with younger communities in America, like maybe Buddhist and Hindus, because they are younger. There may be more recent immigrants. How is their attendance as compared to our attendance, because they being younger in terms of the community? That might provide another perspective as compared to well-established Jewish or the Christian congregations.
Yeah, that's a perspective that can depress us. Because Christian and Jewish researchers basically say, yeah, wait. You're young. Yeah, you're a young religious community. Just wait until you're in the third generation of your community, and then come talk to us about how well you're doing. So, but I must say it's a challenge. Is it inevitable that we're going to lose our young adults? That's the question. Is it inevitable? No, it's not inevitable. So this is our challenge. This is our challenge. And I tell masjids, you need to focus on not what kind of appeals to you as an adult, typically a first generation immigrant to America. You need to focus on what appeals to the second and third generation. That's what our masjids need to focus on, because our future is in their hands. And we don't want to follow the kind of secular bend and the turn away from religion, or the turn away from, incorporating the divine in one's life that is a cancer in American society.
Well, thank you so much, Professor Hassan Bakvi, for your time. Truly appreciate that.
It's always a pleasure to be with you, Brother Mujahid.
Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid and Dr. Bagby. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in to our segment. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube channel or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV and visit our website, muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.